Hello everyone and welcome back to Double Digits episode of the Top Drives show. We've got a bunch of really cool stuff to talk about with you this week and a bit of a memo for some things coming up in the near future. So stand by and welcome to the Top Drive show. Now, the first thing to mention is that in a week's time, we are going to be doing a special holiday episode of the Top Drive show from an undisclosed location. So, in the holiday spirit, if you've got some questions that you wouldn't usually ask, something a little bit different, maybe a bit zany, go ahead and this is your week to ask those questions. We'll be having a lot of fun in a week's time. Related to that, we're going to put up a poll, which will be in this direction, assuming that YouTube never changes its UI. Which we can ask. There are some cool questions in there. Go ahead and answer that, and we'll talk about that in a week. Oh yeah, well let's talk about this. So we've got some questions, a slightly shorter run of questions this week because we're under some time pressure. But we'll start with our Hutch pick for Ken Big La Smoke, who asks, are we going to get a European update with some cars like Peugeot, Opel, VW, so sort of like normal European street cars? So well done for your carbon fibre pack as well on that. What do we do?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of our standard answer by this point, right? We are continuing to add cars.
Yes.
Those are some good sounding cars, and we can't confirm or deny until it happens.
I think it would be fair to say that there are some great European cars as from the brands mentioned that deserve a place in Top Drives.
Yes.
And we are keen to see them in the game.
Yeah,
keen.
And, yes, excellent question.
Very good, yes.
Excellent.
Well done there for Ken Big La Smoke for your carbon fibre pack. And jumping straight into the next one, this one is from Tobias Peterson, who's asking, why don't we freshen up the normal events a bit? They're getting a bit stale, fighting 2 to 3 days for a ceramic. There's plenty we could do to freshen it up without having to even necessarily give better prizes. Maybe just changing those ceramics or aluminiums to premiums here or there, swapping cash for gold, maybe giving away garage slots. Just some little tweaks that we could do to make those events a bit juicier and more varied.
Right. Yeah. So we did have this discussion. So there's one thing that, first of all, why do they all follow the same sort of pattern, right? Part of that is the efficiency of the event generation process. There's now way more events running every week than there were like a year ago. And one of the ways we've done that is we've got an efficient process for generating new plausible events that, make sense and are fair and balanced in the same way the previous ones were. So that efficiency means more events, but it does mean they're more similar. We did do some slightly more experimental events a little while back. It was sort of a penta series instead of a tri series, where you could win some cars that would help you in the next one, that would help you in the first one of the tri series, and that was a bit different. And what was interesting was people were sort of overwhelmingly confused. And they're like, why are we winning this car? And this one's for that one, but for this one. And it wasn't as much of a bundle of joy as you would expect a slightly different event with different prizes to be. So that you're like, oh, okay, maybe normal is good, don't rock the boat.
Yeah, it's definitely not it's not as straightforward as simply mixing it up as much as we can.
Yeah. But as somebody who's been playing it, with a bunch of you guys for over a year, I do sort of know what you mean, and that part of the fun of the game is going, oh, what's the event this time? And there are still interesting new criteria and some interesting tracks coming out. Just driving through the river for the first time today. That was good. And also one other thing that it's good people should know. You probably sort of take it for granted, but every event there's multiple versions of it for people at different RQs, and so that, for example, any kind of 5 times 1 manufacturer requirement, it's just way too difficult to enter for anybody below, RQ 100 or something. So they get like simpler versions of the event. That's part of the reason as well. We have to have a simplifying process because we're actually running like, I don't know what it is, like 35 different events a week if you multiply out all the different versions. But it is conceivable that we could just take the late game version of it and just like change some things, like you say, put in some premiums, change gold for cash or something.
Yeah,
Just
and
to
we,
make
I mean,
it-
we have, I think it was last week or the week before, but talking about people wanting, other means to get slots and things like that.
Right,
So it's,
yeah.
I know, and I know we discussed at the time that we need to be sort of cautious with that, because they're sort of key part of your kind of progress through the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think definitely scope to kind of mix things up in little ways. One thing that I'm conscious of is that actually, I know it's not what's being talked about here, but the daily events actually follow a pattern of kind of 2-week cycles, where there's every day of the week there's a particular theme in the daily events.
Yeah.
And that's something that we haven't actually mixed up for a little while now.
Time. Yeah.
And so it might be that early in the new year we should look at, bringing in a few new themes to the daily events even.
Yeah, yeah, because it's like your sort of bread and butter of your experience. So yeah, things like that. I'll have a look.
Good. We're going to move on to the last question we'll answer today. Sorry that it's a small selection. Don't forget, of course, that if you have some slightly weirder questions, then you can ask us for the holiday special in 1 week's time. This question coming from Enderfailer, who asks, how about a battle royale mode?
They're quite popular.
Yeah, they are, where your position in ranking doesn't matter, so everyone could be set up with anyone in the list, and it only wins and defeats count. So it's slightly more random who you come across on your leaderboard, I think, is what they're getting at, and it's just free for all.
What? But like, do people get knocked out, and any one person?
I don't know. It doesn't say. Like maybe that would. I guess that's what they're trying to say. It's sort of like it would be a knockout system of some kind.
Yeah.
I don't know. How does battle royale work when you've got like the matching system we have?
You'd have to change quite a lot of things. I
think it would have to be some kind of like completely new bracket system.
Yeah, I can imagine wide open matchmaking, but that doesn't sound a huge amount of fun as well.
No, I think what we'd have to be really careful of is that it wasn't sort of amazing for the few people who ended up sort of first, second, and third, and actually the majority of people were only really getting 1 or 2 matches and then sort of getting knocked out. It's something that we're keen for people to be able to really engage with the game and sort of play it for a decent, a good amount of time.
Yeah, because the thing with in a completely straight and unrestricted ladder system like that, the people who have the highest rank are essentially guaranteed a better chance at the position.
Yeah,
whereas
it's even easier than
easier than
before.
normal. Yeah, because otherwise you can just you can outplay to get more points and stuff.
But I don't. Again, I'm going to probably get in trouble from the team. But there are obviously new features coming. There's one feature in particular which is, I think, going to give people a new way to play and compete against other players.
Yeah.
Something in this space feels like it could be then a sort of future step from that, because actually I do think there's something interesting in about this idea that kind of, obviously battle royale in the traditional sense is very, very different from what we've got as a game.
Yeah.
But if you sort of go one level up to what we call the kind of the meta game, but the kind of the sort of not the sort of second to second playing of your cards, but the kind of the higher level than that, I actually think there is something really interesting about that idea of a group of players sort of all coming together into a space and then gradually being sort of whittled down. I think it's just about finding out exactly how we do it, because like you say, it's going to be no fun if it's just always the person with the best hand just comes in and is guaranteed to be the last person standing. That won't work. So we would need to find a way to mix things up a little bit more. But it's
it's cool at least.
It's definitely an interesting idea.
Yeah,
great. Now, as we are recording this, we have just sent live version 7.6 post-launch.
Yeah.
And the notes I have on it essentially is that we fixed some things.
Yeah, hills.
We fixed hills, have we?
So we spoke about this a bit last time, and now this is where we've got to from that, right?
Yep.
So remember, the story so far is quite a lot of story, more story than you would expect.
A storied saga
about hills.
So
originally there was this bug where heavier cars were going up hills faster.
Mhm.
That's crazy and has nothing to do with physics. So we fixed that, and at the same time we're like, oh, you know, the hills are sort of treated as if they're not as steep as they really are, so we should make them that steep, except that they are kind of insanely steep, and that was PL 7.0, and loads of cars were DNFing, and it was not as fun. Like the Mahari couldn't even get up the twisty road hill, but that is a very steep hill, and I think the Mahari probably couldn't do that. It's a very steep incline. So then we're like, oh yeah, okay, it's more interesting if more cars can get up hills. So then we virtually lowered them without actually changing the scene.
Yeah.
But like way low. I don't even know why we went so low. Seems crazy now. Anyway, and then loads of cars could get up them, and in particular cars which have a lot less traction were nonetheless able to get up enough speed and then overtake cars that you would think should be much better in an off-road hill climb situation.
Right.
So that was no good. And we said, all right, so the interesting thing about this is how steep we should treat the hills is a judgment call. Right, get physics correct, but then actually how steep do we want the hills to be in game? So that's where we ran an in-game poll showing different results for like what cars at stock would DNF on these hills if we treated them different amounts of steep.
Yeah.
And we gave like 3 options that were in between the 2 extremes that we'd tested. And it's a peak incline in game of 50%, I think, was the winner. But players looked at those DNFs and they said, but something that still looks a bit funny about this: the McLaren 12C, even in the less steep one, is getting up a dirt hill that should have a 36% incline on it. That doesn't seem quite right. And the Ford Scorpio was DNFing in the same way as the Defender Mark 1. And like, surely the Defender's, it's got its off-road tyres versus standard tyres, it surely should have a benefit. So rather than just rush out a quick patch of the game where we just changed the steepness of the hills to 50%, we were like, oh yeah, we should get to the bottom of that. And that's where we found out there was this weird thing. I'd love to go back in time 2 years, so that physics making, going, what's going on there? Like the traction was not respecting the fact that it was a hill. I think pretty much was treating it as if it was flat.
The normal force was it was assuming it pointed downward at all times.
Whereas when you're on a hill and it's difficult to get traction, it's a very big deal that you're on a hill and your weight is pulling you down, and you need to get traction to get up it. And that is part of the reason that cars you would expect to do well were not getting the full benefit of the traction that they should have.
Yeah. So now those vectors have been resolved in the correct direction,
That's
assumedly.
right.
That's what we've done.
Exactly.
Ooh.
And then there was just one more thing.
Just one more.
Right, which we talked about this, I think, a bit before. The fact that the physics simulation does not actually model a full 3D car with 4 points of contact and like suspension and everything. Firstly, because that will be incredibly complicated. Secondly, because you can't get all the data on those dimensions and the suspension characteristics of all of these cars.
Yeah.
So we just go, all right, well, we'll just model it as like a point in physics. But there are some cars that, because of how they're built, can genuinely get up hills better than that would suggest.
Yeah.
Like some cars have 6 wheels.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's pretty handy.
That's a thing.
Yeah. And then, some cars have tremendous ground clearance, and so if the slope's changing very fast, they're able to deal with that very easily. And so that's where we have this sort of just bonus factor that we just have to put in and say this car should be better up a hill. We just give it a numerical bonus that makes it get up a hill a bit faster. And ones that should be even better have a slightly bigger one.
Yeah.
And those numbers were chosen such that those cars had a suitable advantage in the original version of hills. And now we've changed how steep they are, and we've corrected the traction thing, and so it's like, okay, so you have to look at those bonuses again and change how they work.
So they need to be revised down.
Yeah, so that they work for how the hills actually are now. So we've changed that as well, and hopefully now hill climb results make sense. The physics is now correct. Heavier is worse.
So the plan is
day.
realistic and fun to play, and just no more weird outcomes.
Potentially, we've closed the book on hills. Then have we?
Potentially. We'll see how it all goes. Everybody runs out right now and does thousands of hill climb tests.
Yep.
We've done a bunch ourselves, but we'll, I'm sure, very soon hear from players, and we'll see if we think that everything is as it should be.
Here's hoping.
Hills.
Time now to chat about a couple of other cars. I think it may have dodged the patch notes that we've made some changes to one of the Zondas.
Yeah.
The one we mentioned last time.
Put in one part of it.
Yeah.
It's been through a bit of a change.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I'll have to claim responsibility for all of this. In that, I think we had a Pagani Zonda 760 RS is a prize car, one of the best cars in the game. I think it had been flagged up a little while ago that potentially its stats were a little bit on the slow side. It's still a very rapid car, but didn't quite match up to some of the manufacturer claims. So in a recent update, we went with the manufacturer claims for it because we were having trouble finding a sort of real world data for that.
Because there's not very many of them, right? In fact, there's literally one.
There is one. Yes,
Just
there's a number of sort of almost derivatives of it, which are quite similar, but there is only really one of that car. So we put that in. That probably should have had a little bit more careful studying before it went in. That was that's possibly a slight error there. It was then we put that in the game, and then it wasn't until that went live that we encountered an issue, which actually the 0 to 60 time for that car, considering its rear wheel drive, was actually just so fast that it did weird things to the acceleration curve that the game generates, as in it just really shouldn't.
We put in
be
some
possible.
data points and it generates it as best it can.
Yeah, and generally all cars fit kind of very nicely to the acceleration curves, and it's all good. That car, I think, with that 0 to 60 was just, it really just shouldn't have been able to do that in the way that it could. I mean, it's not miles off. It's not going to be sort of a 4 second to 60 car or anything. But that it was just too rapid, and what it unfortunately meant was that the legendary mid-range acceleration actually dropped quite considerably, as in got worse quite considerably in the last release, which just wasn't good, because that is where that's what ultimately determines unless you're in very short drag races, that mid-range acceleration is a huge part of a car's performance characteristics. So what we did, we went back, we looked even more for kind of comparable data and road tests and write-ups, spoke to the Evo guys, and actually sort of between us all and the data we could find settled on what we felt was a good and realistic new 0 to 60 time. Right. That didn't get communicated, unfortunately, so apologies for that.
It was over 3 seconds, right?
It was over 3 seconds.
It came down to like
2.5.
Which
is just is just, I think, just too fast for a rear wheel drive car. So it's now 2.8, which is still unbelievably rapid. But what it does is it's now we feel confident that actually it's mid-range. It's mid. Well, how do I put? Yes, it's mid-range characteristics are now as accurate as they can be.
Have you said the word mid-range acceleration too often?
I know.
Sorry, I'm just corpsing.
We still need to get it on t-shirts at some point.
We do, I think so.
But yeah, we're really confident in this latest update. It is where it should be, basically in performance terms, against all the other kind of big hitters in the game. It is now, although it's 0 to 60. It's the fastest it's ever been, basically. Yeah. So hopefully, it's as exciting as it should have always been. And just an amazing car. And I think if people are lucky enough to ever win one, they will see that actually that it's kind of I was about to say it again, and now I'm not. But yes, it's performance across the spectrum is quite mighty. Yeah. So but apologies for the fact that we definitely, it's not a scenario that we want. We definitely don't want to be correcting cars one way and then putting them the other way. But just sometimes these things come up.
Yeah, and then we've got another car which is coming into the limelight. We've got the comeback of the Carrera GT, which has returned from its prize car hibernation.
Yeah, so about a year ago when we first had it, Porsche, and then I think this was the first prize car
Yeah.
that we gave out. So
One of,
among
yeah.
those, there have been some others since then, some quite notable ones. Now it is the turn of the Carrera GT to return in the Tri-Series that is kicking off about now. So, John,
So
what's so good about it?
Carrera GT
Yeah.
is so I think what sometimes happens in the hierarchy of cars is that somebody like Porsche will come in a way it's I feel like it's a tiny bit sort of neglected in the car world, in that Porsche and we've discussed it a lot, brought out the 918 Spider, which is just just an incredible kind of all-round hypercar sort of creation, that it kind of, what it does is it can sort of overshadow some of the last kind of hypercars that manufacturer produced.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit of that happens with the Carrera GT, but it is, I mean, it's a very striking car. It's I think a lot of people feel like it's slightly strange in that it looks a lot better with the roof off than it does on. It does kind of quite dramatic things to the profile, but it's RQ28. I guess the kind of stats that you would expect from that. So 205 miles an hour top speed, which is really good. Not to 63.7, which is great. So really solid. I think what it's worth highlighting is that this was this was kind of early 2000s still. It was still kind of early in the days of fully carbon fiber cars. So kind of just everything, the entire kind of monocoque chassis, built from carbon fiber. It brings with it the benefits of obviously of kind of lightness and unbelievable stiffness, and actually I think that's reflected in the fact that it's for its RQ rating, it is right up at the very top of the tree in terms of handling. So with 92 handling as kind of in stock form, it is pretty impressive. And actually I was just going to show you this one race which shows against maybe what you could say is a bit of a comparable title, the Pagani Zonda S. From early 2000s as well. If we put it in the around a twisty circuit, and you can see the Zonda actually gets off the line quite a bit quicker than the Carrera. But from then on, it's the Carrera. It's just that handling. It just every single corner it's making ground and just pulling away. And actually by the finish line, it's got several car lengths over a Zonda, which is a incredibly rapid, very desirable car. So it's like I say, it can be sort of a little bit overshadowed maybe by some of the later Porsche models, but definitely not to be underestimated. And also I just think, I know this has nothing to do with top drives because we don't model gear sticks, right? But if you look at its gear stick, it's beautiful.
What is that?
It's made out of birch and ash as a kind of tribute to the old Le Mans cars that Porsche made, because apparently it was very good at not transmitting the heat from the gearbox through to the driver's hand.
And useful if you don't want to get burned.
Yeah, and it's just, I think, to build such a kind of incredible sort of modern technologically advanced car, and then to have the boldness to put that gear stick in it, I think it has to be admired a lot for that. So just a great looking car, and if you're lucky enough to win one, then I'd probably focus on the chassis and just use it as a bit of a kind of bit of a weapon in anything that's going to be kind of handling related.
Yeah, and also in like strictly top drivesy terms, where we divide cars up sometimes by years and have events. This is kind of obvious if you get a car from the 70s, 80s or 90s, but we also do have this 2000s sort of category, and out of all of those, it is at the top for handling. Out of 2000s. We've also started running out 2000 to 2005 like sub bracket, because actually that's quite interesting for showing some things that were great for their time, and it fits into that as well. So that is another chance for it to shine.
Yeah, very nice car to have.
Well, that is it for us this week, but don't worry, you're going to have another dose of us in about a week's time when we go and have our holiday special. So head down into the comments and ask some slightly different questions, within reason, something a little bit zany, a bit different that you wouldn't ask usually. And we will pick those up next time. There is also the poll which I've mentioned over the cars, selecting some cool cars for us to go and look at. That is it for us this week. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for playing Top Drives. This has been the Top Drive Show.
Bye.